Okay, so hi everyone. I'm Matthias, and like Radimir said, I'll be speaking to you about internationalization today. Just to start off, maybe some background info about me. I'm from Malta, which is this tiny little country. In fact, it's so small that the name on the map is bigger than the country itself. I love pasta and emojis, as you'll see. Emojis, not much pasta. And I'm a product manager at Project A. So Radimir kind of stole the slides. I had some content here about Project A, what we do, but like he said, we work on projects with our ventures. So I'm part of an operational team. We've got some devs and designers and product managers on this one project. And this one project, well, we have more projects, but one of them is Untitled 24. And Untitled 24 is an online shop for car parts. It's a pretty big company, so it's not a startup like most of our other ventures. It's got about 500 employees. They make over 180 million in annual revenue. I think I'm allowed to say that. They've got over 1.5 million products in their product catalog. So it's not really a manual thing. There need to be systems in place to make sure that all this kind of makes sense there. And it's all managed in over 3,000 categories. And yeah, they're actually the biggest car parts reseller online in Germany, and they have plans to be the biggest in Europe. And that's kind of what I'm going to try to talk to you about today. So the whole idea with internationalization has been coming for a while, and this was the basic strategy, was that let's start with something simple. Let's start with Austria. It's the closest thing to Germany. It's a small market. It should be relatively easy to do. The idea was to do Netherlands next, also a small country, different language, always introducing something new. France is a bit bigger, so another new language, and then we'll probably move on to, I don't know, something like Poland, and there we have new currencies to deal with, and stuff like that. So that was the basic plan, and it seemed fairly straightforward. Thing is, Austria alone took over a year to do. It wasn't specifically Austria. We built a new platform to enable internationalization, to make it easier for us, hopefully. But the stuff I'd like to talk to you about is that even Austria, which we thought was so simple, because we thought, yeah, let's just do a couple of translations. No, not even translations, because it's the same language. It should be super easy to do. Even something this simple was difficult because of the technical, logistical, and cultural constraints we were faced with. And so hopefully I'll be able to marry this stuff kind of with accessibility to show how these things can prevent accessibility, and just go through some examples of cases we had, basically. So I'd like to do this from the point of view of the customer. So we'll just go through the shop a bit. It's an e-commerce shop, like I said before, and this is a very standard customer journey for an e-commerce shop. First thing, you need to be discovered. You're going to a new country. People don't know about you. People need to find you. Then they'll come to the site, they'll land on the homepage or some other page. They'll search for products or navigate to find products. They'll select something based on information that you show. Hopefully, they'll want to buy something, they'll check out, and then eventually they'll receive their goods. And all this is kind of encapsulated with the content that you present and the way you present, the way you communicate to the customer. So the first part's discovery. Like I said, in Germany we're the biggest. You go on Google and you type in, I want brake pads for my car, and Kfz will be one of the top 5. In Austria, no one really knows us. And the same goes especially even more for Netherlands and stuff. You might have people who bought from us before, from Austria, from Germany, but it gets worse with the other countries. But even in Austria, so on Google AT, you don't see us. So what can you do to improve this? One thing is to make sure your hreflang tags are set up. So you'd think hreflang tags basically link content usually in different languages across sites, or in different languages on the same site. What's interesting is I think most people associate it with having a different language, saying, so we have similar content and different language at this location. But interestingly, it's a bigger problem, so to say, if it's the same language. Because with different languages, if you don't set this up, you just don't get the benefits. You can't say, okay, we have a new shop and we're pointing our users there in a different language, so that's an SEO boost. But if it's the same language, if we didn't do it for AT, it's the same language, and Google would assume we're competing against each other because it doesn't know that the Austrian website and the German website are linked. So this is something, if you don't do it, it will actually be negative for the same language, and for different languages, it's just a big help, especially if you already have a big website like the German version already established. And one of the ways to do this is just to have a sitemap, and you basically link the the different same content pages over here. There are different ways of doing it. You can put the tags in the head as well. No need to go into so much detail, I think, now. Another important thing to think about is marketplaces. So I think everyone knows eBay and Amazon probably. They're the biggest ones in Europe. In Eastern Europe, AliExpress is really growing as well. But you've also got things like Google Shopping. So when you type in something in Google, at the top and on the right, you already get some results like we saw before as well on the right. And people tend to buy from these a lot, especially price comparison sites as well. And the reason why this is so important is because, according to the study, 56% of the global e-commerce is actually happening on marketplaces. So, of course, you want people to shop on your sites. This gives you more control and stuff. But at the end of the day, you need to kind of go to where the user is. And apparently 56% of all the users buy mainly on these sites. There's some other statistics as well that I think like 30% of people start their search on Amazon instead of Google nowadays for a product. That number might be wrong. You'll have to double check me on that. So yeah, so once you get discovered, people land on your page somewhere, either the homepage or somewhere else, and like an airplane, you kind of want this to be a smooth landing. You want to explain to users, okay, what's the site all about? Where are they on the site? Where have they landed? And how can they move on from there? So what are the next steps? And we have a fairly simple homepage over here. We just have a couple of banners, navigation at the top. So let's see what we actually had to deal with over here. If we start, translations is the obvious thing, you know, we just had to, can you see the mouse? Yeah. Translate the categories, translate the placeholders and stuff. Just any word basically needs to be translated. I didn't have a good example in this case, but I think it's important to remember when doing translations that the context is important as well. In German, I'm not sure if it's such a big problem, but in certain languages, when you use a word or at what point in a sentence can have a very different meaning. So that's, again, I didn't have a good example, unfortunately, but something to remember, that context is very important. And there are actually companies that specialize when you ask them, when you want to outsource translations, you can ask them, you can tell them where the feature is being used or send them a screenshot or something, so they'll take this into account. Something that people just forget sometimes is you also have to translate the URL. It's kind of weird that you land on a page and the URL, let's say you're on a French page, but the URL is German because that's the original place that the shop was opened, especially if you're sending links around. If you're just going through Google, maybe it's not a big deal, but as soon as you start sharing links and that stuff, it's kind of a weird, jarring experience. Next thing, banners. You'd think in the same language, it's not as big of a problem. In our case, unfortunately, the text is part of the banner, so you have to remember to change the images everywhere practically, if that's the case. That's a bit of a technical restriction, but maybe a bit more of a environmental constraint is just, let's say over here, we're advertising stuff for winter tires, ice scratchers, stuff like that. It wouldn't make much sense to sell this in Greece, for example, where there isn't a very hard winter, or in Malta, from where I come from. So it's not just about displaying the same thing everywhere and just translating the text. Again, you have to think about how it will be used and the whole context in which it will be used. Another thing is on the homepage, so a little detail, we had a customer support number at the top. So we actually have one customer call center kind of, but the numbers are different. So you always want to make sure that you're localizing the number as well, because people don't want to get the impression that they're phoning on an international number. I think the costs nowadays, especially within Europe, aren't that bad anymore. But let's say you buy from Amazon.com, there you kind of want to see your local thing if possible. And probably more important than the number itself is, do you actually have people who can answer the phone in the right language? This is not as easy as you might think. You might find people speaking the language easily, but certain products are complex. They need to be trained in the subject as well. In our case, it's quite technical. People phone for advice about their car. And it's pretty difficult to find a French-speaking mechanic in Germany who also wants to spend their whole day on the phone. So you might have to think from a long time before about who you want to hire, how you're going to get them up to speed. So this is more of a logistical and personal problem, kind of. The technical solution is easy. Find someone who speaks the language, but actually finding someone to do it, that's the tough part. Another thing, which we did very late, so just changing the logo. It seems obvious in hindsight, but for us, the name is part of the logo, and Kfz-Teile for the non-German speakers means like car parts, and this isn't obvious in other languages. So I had to update the brands because it just didn't make sense. Car Pardue maybe doesn't really explain what it does either, but at least it's a more generic brand kind of. And it's surprisingly easy to forget that, oh, the logo needs to be changed, because at the end of the day, you've been looking at it for the last 1 or 2 years, and these details just like fall down under the table because you're just in your little tunnel vision on your project. So yeah, people have landed, they kind of get what you're all about, and they start searching. And you want to make this easy for people that either search or navigate, so this is another thing you need to obviously take into consideration. And this goes kind of the thing I mentioned before, that even about the context thing is this linguistic nuance. So everyone thinks, okay, we're going abroad, they speak a different language, we have to translate, but if we're going to Austria, they speak German, not a problem. But Austrians still speak differently to Germans. In this case, if you want a brake disc in Germany, most people look for Bremsscheibe and they'll get a search suggestion, everything. In Austria, everyone searched for Scheibenbremse, which sure means the same thing, but no one thought that they'd search that way. So that's another thing. It really helps to get local people to see how they speak, and of course build up a system that enables you to quickly update these things. For example, boosting your search with synonyms. Because what we saw in user tests as well is that people, if they're typing, if the search suggestions don't come up, the majority just completely stopped searching. So we'd lose all the people looking for Scheibenbremse, and they were by far our biggest search term. So this was a small fix, but a big win for us. Data availability is also a problem and also a solution. In this case, in Austria, the information that you have is on your car ID. You get the national code, it's called, and you can call an API that's supplied by the government to check what type of car this is. In Netherlands, this car ID doesn't exist. Instead, they just do it over the number plate. And the thing is that people will expect this to be the case. A good way of seeing what features you need is checking out established competitors who do it well. So in this case, we just went on our competitors, so everyone looks by the number plates, and you start your search that way. It's pointless adding this for the French people. You kind of have to hide it because there's nothing they can do with it. They just don't have this information available. On the other hand, we still kept the option, for example, that you can manually select your car. This is doing something extra. The traditional approach here would be we have car data for every country, and the first thought was to allow everyone, every country has their own set of car data. The thing is that I have even a personal story. My dad, for example, just bought a car from the UK, like an old timer, and it has a different brand. Like in the UK, Opel is called Vauxhall. And if we just did it with the car data for Germany, he would never have been able to find anything on our site, even though we do have the parts. So sometimes you have to think a bit beyond what's necessary or what's normal, and think, okay, what else can we offer them? Because we actually have more than they expect. So that's always a good thing to keep in mind. So yeah, once you've seen a bunch of products, you want to choose one probably, and you need to see what stuff's available, what influences your choice on which products you're going to choose. And here we have a pretty standard product detail page with the details, and let's see what we need to consider over here. And the most obvious probably is the currency, maybe not in Europe, but later, sorry, not in Austria or Netherlands, but eventually with Poland or Denmark. This is a very important thing. Different countries have different currencies, and people want to shop in their local currency. In fact, if you look at Germany itself, 57% of Germans said they would not return to a site if it's not selling items in their own currency. So if it's only selling in dollars or in a different currency, more than half the people would just never come back. That's obviously a huge number of people. Related to currency kind of as well, and just payment in general, is taxes. It's a bit of a boring topic, but pretty important. I mean, we think in Europe we have all the same taxes. We don't. We have the VAT system, value-added tax, but every country is allowed to determine its own rates. So, for example, in Austria we've got 20%. In Germany, I think it's 19%. But what's interesting as well is that apart from just having a different VAT tax rate, depending on the country, you classify products under different tax groups. So, for example, in Germany, a book might be reduced tax because Germany pushes education a lot, so they tax it less. Whereas in another country, it might just be a normal item, and it's taxed at the full rate. So you can have different stuff. You can have normal, reduced V2, no tax, and null tax. I still haven't really gotten the complete thing, but these are all different and valid tax rates. delivery costs and estimates. I think delivery costs is something that will become obvious. That's the further away your places are from the warehouses, the more money users will have to eventually pay for it, or you just absorb the cost yourself. What we realized quite late on in the German side here, auf Lager means on stock, and we actually have on the German side auf Lager, and it says delivery within 1 to 2 days. Said, yeah, not a problem. And we went live that way, and then someone came and called like, yeah, this is taking forever. And then we called our DHL or whatever. They said, yeah, it's impossible to actually deliver to Austria these kinds of products in 2 days. So in this case, the quick win was to take it out, because we don't have a nice delivery estimation system yet. But yeah, it's these little details that you look at it from the front end and you see, okay, the translations all make sense, it's understandable. But if you can't actually deliver, then it's inaccessible. You're kind of lying to the user. And of course, the most fun thing, laws and regulations. That, yeah, in some countries, you just have different regulations for items. And in Germany and Austria, for oil, you are required by law to show where you can actually dispose of this. A trick here is to follow the German laws, because they are among the strictest in Europe. So if you cover Germany, you're pretty much covered for every other country. But yeah, lots of these things came up later on. So a tip here would be just check with legal very early on. Especially at a product catalog of 1.5 million products, this can take a while. Some other stuff that's, again, you might not think of. So there are other resources here. We have service information or instruction manuals. You also have to have the translated version, the localized version on the site. And not only that, but again, more on the physical and logistical side, the package that you actually deliver to the user should also have these things translated. It doesn't help a mechanic in France if you send him a German instruction manual. It all needs to be like whole and one common experience. But again, something that just looking at the site you might not realize. You always have to think a bit on the outskirts. I don't know if you guys know Beyond Tellerrand, the conference, and it's in the name. Always think beyond your plate, kind of beyond the edge of your plate. So yeah, people found what they like. They found something they want to buy, and in the checkout, the most important part, arguably, of an e-commerce site, the most important thing is building trust with the user. You want to make sure that they feel secure, that the money they're sending ends up at the right person and doesn't get lost somewhere, and that their product actually gets sent to the correct address. And they don't want any of their details to be leaked. And just a common way of doing this is just displaying which payment providers you offer and which shipping providers, and as well offering a multitude of these. Like before I started this, I thought, yeah, PayPal, all my friends use PayPal, let's just use PayPal, it's super easy to integrate. Why do we need all this other stuff? But if we look at some statistics again, we see that it really varies from country to country what people prefer. So in Denmark, almost 80% use credit cards, that's their preference. But if we look at the Netherlands, everyone prefers to use Ideal, it's like 95%. Credit card would work as well, but something else like bank transfers, totally forget it in Netherlands. If you don't offer Ideal, you're losing out on a big amount of people. And yeah, address validation, probably a favorite topic of front-end devs. This is something little stuff, like the postcode. In Germany it's 5, just numbers. In other countries it might be a mix of numbers and letters. Something like a personal pet peeve that always bugged me back when I was living in Malta. Many checkouts force you to choose a region. Malta has one region. It's just annoying, and it makes you think, can I shop here? Like, what will happen if I put in a region? Like, if I choose New York, where is it going to end up? Will they ship it to my house, or will they send it to America? It creates doubts, and you lose that trust. It gives the impression that these guys don't know what they're doing. So yeah. Finally, you did your checkouts and you're just waiting. And another thing to remember, back to the branding thing we had on the first page, it's something that can just fall like off the side of the table again. If you use custom packaging, we can't send people Kfz-Teile 24 in the Netherlands because our brand in the Netherlands is Car Pardoux. I think if someone receives something and they have to sign for it, they'll be like, what's this? This is not what I ordered. You need to make sure that the packaging and the contents are also branded in the correct way. So yeah, that was more or less the journey that I'd expect a normal user to do. And like I said, all this is kind of wrapped in the content and communication parts. So first of all, it's important to localize all your communications. And when you really dig in, you'll notice that there are lots. You've got newsletters, you've got transactional mails, like when the user signs up, when they confirm their email address, when they place an order, when the order is shipped, even offline communication. So like I said, in the packaging over here, you'll have your delivery note in there, you'll have a return form. This is branded as well. So you need to keep all these things in mind and just make sure it's consistent throughout. And part of that consistency is the personality and tone of voice you want to use. So these are just some emails I have. These are very like informal and friendly. You've got from Intercom, they're on a first name basis. Hotjars, where when they email you, it's like, hi, yeah, we're friends. It's just their brand, kind of, the language they use. I think in countries like Germany, or let's take Spain, where there's a formal and informal version of greeting someone. In Germany, Sie, du. I think in Spanish, tú and usted. I don't know. Something like that. It's important what type of company do you want to portray yourself as. Maybe in the case of car parts, you don't want to seem like the fun guy at a party. You want to say that, you know, we're safe, we're secure, our parts will save your life, kind of. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And of course, all this content stuff, it's not a one-shot thing. It's not you translate everything at one go and that's it. Content management's an ongoing process. You need a robust CMS with internationalization built in to be able to do this easily, to allow all your content managers to do this. And content managers, yeah, you need more of these probably. Again, even if someone speaks different languages, it's still really good to have someone, a local, who, especially in specialized products like these, so car parts, it helps to have people who really understand the market, and you just need a lot of these, and you might need to really train them as well. Of course, with the Spotify thing, what I mean over here is just, especially with creatives like writers, everyone will have their own style. So I think a good way of getting around this is to have like a culture handbook or a style guide, not just for design stuff, but even for, again, back to the personality of your brands. What are you trying to convey? Because everyone will write their own stuff, but it should still be geared and keep this vision and tone in mind. So something that like that can every help. And I really like this one of Spotify, which says like just to everyone who came before, who's there and will come. We're one team and we have one vision, one mission, and so on. So yeah, hopefully what I meant to show with this is that internationalization is not just a technical problem. It's not just a matter of translating some stuff. It's an entire organizational problem. You've got technical constraints like just this SEO stuff, the hreflang tags. You've got logistical constraints that, yeah, can we actually ship this in time? Do we have the products? Do we have the people working on the back ends to support all this stuff? And cultural constraints. Just because someone speaks the same language doesn't mean they're the same type of customer. Each country, each area has its own behaviors and expectations, and these are things you need to keep in mind. So what you need is a holistic approach to all this. And what I'd just like to finish off with is this, that if you want your site to be accessible to an international audience, you need to make your users feel at home every step of the way. So basically, you need to make the whole experience familiar and consistent for all your users, so that they never feel like you just grabbed something and put some lipstick on a pig to make it for them, but you made this for them, for that specific user. And that's the feeling you should do to gain trust, because trust is also one of the most important things to get people to give you money at the end of the day. Yeah. Any questions? No? Okay. Yeah.
Have you ever come across an issue with color versus branding? So in some cultures, colors have very different connotations.
Mm-hmm.
Red with China versus other places.
Yeah.
Was that ever something you faced?
Not yet. Like I said, we launched Austria a while back. We just launched Netherlands yesterday. Maybe it will happen. I don't, like top of my head, I don't think it will be a problem in Europe. But yeah, that's a very good point. Somewhere like China.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that come up where your branding is a certain color and you go to another place and all of a sudden it kind of rocks the world.
I think it depends as well on I think in France, just generally, if you look at sites, they're more blue, for example. People are just used to these things being a certain color. In Germany, if you look at all these sites, they're all like, they're orange, green, bright blues and stuff. It's looks a bit weird to everyone else maybe, but that's what people expect, kind of. And you need this high contrast. If you look at the customer base, a lot of them will be like 50 plus men, all wearing glasses, if I think of my dad. So yeah, you need to color. It might look ugly, but it works kind of as well. Yeah. And yeah.
So you user tested also with locals from the other countries, as I understood earlier. How much of user testing did you do with people from Netherlands?
Not enough. In Netherlands, nothing. We just had some in-house Austrians and checked stuff with them. I think we need to do much more user testing. There are many usability issues as well that we still need to look into. We're still trying to build up the process of user testing, but it should have happened from way before this project started, and it did actually happen back then, but it needs to be an ongoing process, because even over time, this was a long project. If you look at the whole history, it's been over a year, and just situations change as well in the years. Let's say you use a specific word, might have been cool a year ago, but nowadays it's not that cool. And as well, your demographics are getting younger potentially, so we're seeing a shift to people 25 to 35, for example, and then maybe we should update our branding to target these people more.
How do you manage your text streams?
Yeah, we're using at the moment Talk, I think it's called, this agency kind of. They're hooked up to GitHub for us, and whenever we do a pull request, they check it and translate. I'm not that deep into it, but I don't think they take this whole context part into it. So I forgot what the company was that I used in a previous company, and they actually send a screenshot where you want to use it, and they'll take the whole context with it as well. But these guys just translate through there. It's scalable because it's just through pull requests. You just don't need to touch it kind of anymore, and you just need to check it at the end. But yeah, the feedback loops are just a bit slow, because by the time they do something and it's approved and it gets in, none of our devs speak the languages. You have to wait till the content manager sees it eventually, and it might be too late by then already. It was like, yeah, push something out. And
how much the code base suffer from this change, from moving to one language to multiple?
Not at all, I would say, because we're building a completely new platform, so it wasn't just internationalization. So the 1 year to Austria wasn't just because of Austria. We built a new platform with internationalization in mind. But definitely there are things that you forget about, so there's a lot of refactoring to do. So we built it to be international, but then there's always stuff that pops up. Like the synonyms came in very late. So we had the idea at the beginning, but it wasn't part of it yet.
Based on my experience, you can always abstract this configuration for the different countries that you're supporting with your content and your web product in general, and be specific depending on the use case. For example, if you this example that you gave with the digits and the numbers between Germany and, for example, English-speaking countries. You can always abstract that in a high-level configuration. The code base will be the same. You're just getting this from this main config file that you have, for example, which is a separate thing from just purely translating the labels and strings. That's like
okay, but for example, so in the case of the forms, the forms changed a lot. Also, the input were totally different.
Yeah.
In that case, you
again, the validation will be part of this high-level configuration.
Okay.
So you can change it based on the use case. And also, I believe it's a nice approach in terms of scalability. If you want to add more countries, it will be just another part of your main config file for these use cases that you have depending on the country.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yep.
Do you talk about, or do you support the possibility that I'm, for example, in France, but I'm German, and I would like to see the German side, and like this is something that drives me crazy with most of the sites in Germany, where like I go on a site and there's no way to change the language, and I think the same could be said to the bilingual countries like Malta, where we have Maltese and English both as the legal languages. So
yeah.
Is this
something that's planned is that there's a .com version of all this, and there you'd have all the languages probably and all the way that stuff's shipped out kind of. But for now the focus was really one country, one language. But then if we go to Netherlands, for example, we'd have Dutch, but we might want to introduce Belgian as well, French. They have their own language now? I'm not sure. Flemish, I guess. So yeah, it depends on the country. We haven't needed to yet have multiple languages in the same country, but it's definitely coming. Okay. Maybe we'll have another talk then, and I'll give you an update on how tough that was.
Were there any issues you faced with when this actually combined with accessibility, like image descriptions and things like that? Was there anything special that you had to do to account for how those might be captured differently in different cultures?
I think till now it was mostly the search behavior, because that's where we can even manipulate it the most, that we see how different people search. And then we update with synonyms, or even, I forgot the exact name, but the way German words are formed, when you sort of split them for a search, they're actually the other way around. But the problem, with 1.6 million products, most of it, there's this like supplier who supplies the same data for everyone. Now the thing is, in my opinion, the way how we differentiate ourselves from our competitors is to really manage this data, and as you said, make it super, at least for our top 1,000 products or something, make it really specific for the way people search for it there, and not whatever they type in, they get the same product. Till now it's not happening, but I think it definitely should happen. Of course, then you run again into the logistical problems. Someone needs to do it. You need people who really know what they're doing to do it. You can't just get an intern to do it. You need a mechanic to do it. And finding a French mechanic who wants to work on the computer, it's tough. Or any mechanic who wants to work on the computer is tough, I guess.
I was wondering how you manage the design itself. So if you have like one web page and you're doing the design of it, you need to consider all the different versions in the different languages and you're talking through. So do the design team like create different versions of that, or they create one in like one main language and then create variations?
Yeah, I wish I could give you like a really nice way of how we did it. We basically the opposite of what I think we should do. So we just grabbed one and then like piece for piece translated it and went as we went. But ideally, I agree that from the beginning you should have these thoughts there to like, hey, this is going to change, and yeah, make it flexible that way. For at least for the car search. So maybe if I go back to the beginning. And all this is work in progress, that's a disclaimer. But for this stuff, so we have designs in this case was really, okay, what are our next 10, 15 countries? How can they search for cars? And then it was part of the design to say, okay, let's make it, let's try and make it consistent throughout. But I don't think it's happened on the entire site, but it should. Yeah. So always start with German, it's the toughest to design for. In Europe, maybe. Other questions? Cool. Then, thank you.
I just want to show you an example, because I attended, back on the topic, an example of